Dr. Pauline Crawford, thank you so much for being here, for joining us. Could you please just in a couple of sentences, like as if I was a 6-year-old, explain to me who you are and what you're doing?
Well, I will do my best. As I'm Dr. Pauline Crawford, and I have a deep passion about people and how people behave, how we communicate, how we exist in this world. And I think all of my life, I have really loved harmony. I was brought up in a harmonious family in England a long time ago. And as I watch the world disintegrate and get into arguments, I've really studied the nature of humanity in individuals and the unity that we can bring together. So I would say I'm a behavioralist, I'm a conversationalist. I have a PhD in entrepreneurialogy, which is the study of the mindset of growth and expansion and creativity. But originally, I loved mathematics. So I did a degree in sociology and statistics, which at the time I wasn't sure how that applied to my life. But I realize now it does, because we live in a data-driven world that is trying to ignore emotions. And so my passion is the ability for women and men, and note that I say it that way around, women and men, that women lead men to a place of authentic harmony, which impacts our economic status in the world and also impacts our societies and our communities. And the key is that we retain our unique individualism as well as understand the unification of communities. So I feel like I'm a global emissary for authentic harmony.
There's so many things to touch on now. The first thing that I would love to know, how do we grow? Like, what does your background tell us about how do we perfectly grow and bring our creative, authentic power to the world?
Well, that is a really important question, because worldwide we have education systems that have and still are controlling us. So I went to school, I had to get my O levels, I had to get my A levels. There were certain subjects I loved and certain subjects I absolutely hated. I'm dyslexic, which I didn't realize at the time, so I don't like spelling. I never thought I would write a book, which I have. So when our education limits us, it's a challenge. So the other aspect that comes in here is our familial background, our parents. I was very blessed to have parents who were reasonably traditional, but also were not going to control me if I didn't like something. So there was that balance there of express yourself. So for me, we need to understand that every human body is given natural gifts and skills. And our education system at the moment sometimes doesn't highlight what is our best trait. We're made to do things that the system or the world says you have to have. So you have to be able to read and write, etc. You should be able to read large books, And what I discovered, and maybe that was my innate kind of entrepreneurial spirit, I realized what I did well, and then I did my best to get through the bits that I wasn't good at. But my first experience I want to share is that when I left university, and I did get my degree in sociology and statistics, I can't say it was a good degree. I mean, I didn't get a good mark, but I didn't want to fail because I didn't want to disappoint my parents. So even in that is something, especially for women, we want to do our best. And sometimes we put ourselves second as well as the world putting us second. But what I discovered is that when I got into a job, which I got in a tourism business in the 70s, I landed in the right place, but it was my ability to do something with it that made a difference. So that's what I believe in the world. We have to do our best in whatever situation we're in and tune into what we do best. And what I discovered was that if I was energetic and enthusiastic and I listened, I started getting the idea of, well, how did this business work? So over a 6-year career in that business, I rose to be senior product manager. I didn't set out to do that. I just did what I did best. And over the last few decades, what I've realized is that education and academia isn't necessarily the control function of how we're going to express ourselves in the world. And I think that's a big issue now, because we still live in a world where people define themselves by their role and their title and their piece of paper on the wall. I went to, did I go to Harvard? Am I this? And it's
the labels.
It's developed labels which are controlling us. Whereas I think labels are okay. It's what we do with them that makes the difference. And especially studying women. And so I would say my evolution has been very organic. It's rolled over because I've looked at the situation and going, okay, How do I deal with this? And then our true nature comes through. And my true nature is that I love harmony and I love people. So, not everybody can have the same journey, but I think the key is to listen to yourself. And I give you an example of this. I've been working with a lot of senior people in different sectors, and I was working in the police force in Great Britain. And one client, a male, I was sharing his profile with him and sharing that he could do X, Y, and Z because they were his best traits. And he said, "You mean I can do what I love best?" I said, "Yeah." And he was in his midlife. And he said, "Well, they don't tell you that round here. They expect you to be omnicompetent." That was his word. I.e., if you did A, B, and C, good. But if you didn't do D, you better go off and do a course on that. And he said, of course, then every time you learn something new, which isn't necessarily part of your core, it depletes what's at core. So this idea of being omnicompetent, you've got to be great at absolutely everything, is a failure of society to understand. So we do need specialists, but we also need generalists and specialists to understand each other. And I'm not saying no academia, but I'm saying there is another way. There's an experiential part of life which has credit. And that credit is actually part of what I'm involved in with the study and my PhD in entrepreneurialogy. It's about combining knowledge, experience, and imagination. Women have a huge amount of imagination. But of course, if you get into company that say, that's not useful, that's not on our list, sorry, you've got to be omnicompetent and don't go and be creative. And so the world is dividing between those people who need the status quo and tradition and those like Steve Jobs, Richard Branson, people who explode the world with new ideas. And those people on the other side are going, "Oh, I don't know how that works. So I'm not going to go there."
And it's so interesting what you're saying, because people, as I experience, they want to become more like Steve Jobs. They want to be more like Richard Branson, but then the steps to get there, or the thinking or the change of perspective, is very, very difficult. How do you teach people, or how do you, let's say, give people the first, glimpse of how to change?
It's very interesting because we need to be more of who we are.
Right.
And sometimes we don't know who we are.
Right.
Which is very curious because,
right.
When you arrive in the world as a baby, you actually come in with lots of gifts. And my son could ride a tricycle when he was 1.5. It was just a little tricycle, but he just happened to be he stood up and walked at 10 months and he was riding this, but he was quite deaf, so he couldn't hear and he didn't speak. Now, I could have been a very picky mother and say, "Oh my God, my child's not speaking," and not say, "Wow, he can cycle down the corridor." So I believe that every human has natural gifts which are not being expressed. And therefore, I often just help people by unpacking what they, it's a bit like, "Oh, I'm going on holiday and I've got to take all these things." And then you take too much. When you go to the holiday, you get to the end of the holiday, you think, "Oh, I only wore one thing. It was actually my favorite thing." And so it's kind of a simplistic view of what is very complex, but we are we're over drowning what is our natural gift in the world. I think it's very interesting when you literally sit with a client and you just listen as you ask these questions, what do you enjoy doing best? So your natural gift is something that you didn't learn at school and you didn't learn from your parents. It was expanded in your household family, but it's something that you do so naturally. Your best friend will say, "Hey, you're really good at this," and you'll go, "That," because it's so natural.
I can't make money out of that, out of what I'm enjoying, because life is hard. I have to prove myself.
That's right. What do you think about Sir Richard Branson, who's my favorite go-to entrepreneurologist? He just did he didn't love school. He wasn't that good at school, but he just loved doing what he did. He had ideas, that music label. Could I do something with that? Yes. Okay, do it. So as long as you don't have people around you saying, no, you can't do that. I mean, that's where the stop comes in most cases. Now, not everybody in the world will be entrepreneurship bound, but your ability to be positive or negative comes from that early spring of being born and just being allowed to be the little kid you are. So I love to take people back to what is a natural gift and then look at what have you learned all the way through your life? Like this gentleman of 40 plus who was in the police force, having done all these certificates. But actually, what he loved best was presented to him, and he wasn't necessarily using it. And it could be as simple as some people are more linguistic, some people are more artistic, some people are more mechanical, some people are more tidy and administrative. There are certain traits that we are born with, and I think we should influence education to be much more about the student, not about the teacher.
Bravo. Oh, wonderful. Absolutely. Now I want to go back first and foremost, because you said something in the beginning which struck me a lot. You were born into a harmonious family and you made it your mission to basically, you're not going like a lot of people, or like myself also, turning your wounds into wisdom, but you were turning your very special surrounding into something that people can benefit from. In change, I often feel like we have to have a lot of, or some belief that you have to have a lot of pressure, that you have to have a lot of wounds in order to then transform yourself when it's, when you're coming to an edge. But you have chosen a different kind of approach, which is more like a vision, I would say. It's like from the outside, looking from the outside, which is very, very interesting. This different kind of path, or this different kind of fixed star that brought you to where you are now. How did this come about, and how does this serve you and the planet today?
Well, it's interesting. I think every experience of your life is part of your life, and a lot of these things I didn't realize when I was younger. So, a lot of aha moments come at every stage of life. I give you an example. My granddaughter's now 14. When she was 6, we were having a slight argument about a book that she wanted me to read, or I wanted to read it. As we got a bit tense in the bedroom about this, she suddenly looked at me and she said, "I don't know what your life is about, and you don't know what my life is about." And I just listened, and I thought she's absolutely right, that everybody's journey is their own. Now, I didn't necessarily realize this when I was little. I was in the middle of the family. I was the third child of elder brother, elder sister, younger brother. Very, post-war, 50s, 60s, Beatles, I was blessed with the age I was born into. But I think all I saw around me was I had people everywhere. There was parties and tea parties and lots of uncles and aunts. And I loved being with people. So maybe that was my natural gift. But understanding our experiences comes with maturity. And at the time, you just do it. And sometimes you make mistakes, and sometimes you get it right or wrong. But in a way, there's no such right or wrong. And I learned things also in retrospect. I remember a time when I thought, oh my God, I have to know everything. I can't admit that I don't know what these people are talking about. So I would try and pretend, oh, yes. And then it would go wrong. And then at some point, I realized it's okay not to know everything and to say, gosh, I don't know anything about that. So I fell into this role of being a facilitator, a people change process, behavioral consultant. I fell into it by just being and understanding the experience and admitting I didn't get everything right, and then formulating it. But I think we don't honor enough the experiences we have. And a lot of people get drowned by their negative experiences. Oh my God, I was so bad. I didn't do that well. So my question is always, what did you learn through it? That went wrong. So what did you learn? What was the gift? And that's only come in the second half of my life, maturity. And even now, I still challenge myself. When something doesn't go well, I say to myself, what's my part in this? What's my responsibility? That kind of evolution is also impacted by the kind of character you are. Now, I study men and women, and different types of women, different types of men. We're not all the same. And I just love finding out about the differences around us. Whereas a lot of people don't like differences. They want everything to be the same and to stay the same. Now, that's okay for them. So I'm not saying everybody has to be like me. But I think as we go through our life journey, the one thing that always comes back to me is it's my journey. This is your journey. So many people try and fix somebody else. Parents try and fix children, or they say, oh, my children, I did everything for them and now they have left me. No, that's their journey. And everybody's journey is their own journey, but in observation of other people's journeys. So it's not ignoring other people, but it's not being drowned by other people, over controlled by other people, or trying to over control other people. which is what we see happening at the moment. So the education system says you've got to do this, or the school system says that's what parents should or shouldn't do. And this whole idea of, am I getting it right? Forget that.
Yeah.
Am I asking the right question?
Yeah, I love that. What, in your experience, is the best nurturing surrounding for us to
Well,
develop, change, create, have a pleasant journey here on Earth?
that's very interesting as well, because human beings love to belong. It's a very fundamental aspect of human being, along with the other one, which is a need to achieve. Now, I think animals tend to like to belong. Certain species belong to their own tribe of lions or whatever it is. Animals generally don't have a sense of achievement. That is something that is very human. So I think, surrounding ourselves by positive, loving people is a natural place. But some people like loads and loads of people, and some people like only a few. That it's not saying, it's like people think I have to be an extrovert in order to be okay. No, you can be a beautiful introvert. You can be, in my work, I have 2 different types of male archetypes and 2 different types of female archetypes, and they see the world differently.
Well, can you elaborate on these
Okay, well,
types?
fundamentally, so the notion of being a human being is that you're in this world with everybody else as human, but we're different. So just take this fundamental thing that men and women are different. And it's very well researched that, we know our biology is different. We have different pieces in our body. So, in our genitalia and the way we're formed, but not just our sexual biology, in our physicality. Men have a higher strength in their physical muscle, whereas women have a higher pain threshold in their body. I mean, I'm not medical, but there's lots of things you can study about the differences. But in terms of communication, men generally are task focused and think in either or. Yes, no, task focused, do it. They don't have that emotional communication that women have. So women are menstrual. We're gifted with a different set of emotions. We like to talk and we like to embrace tasks. We still get tasks done, but we do it in a relational way. So generally, men are task focused, women are relational focused. But we each have a masculine and feminine energy. So you'll find that some men are very masculine minded men, and I call them rulers. They're very singular. They definite yes, no, and they like to know, when are we going to get this done? And do we do it now? 1, 2, 3. Whereas there's a group of men who have got a feminine energy, nothing to do with sexuality, but a feminine energy which makes them say, why? Why are we here? And they're often theorists, and that they like to think about things, and they're more intuitive, but they're still male. It could be any sexual variation, but they still have that yes, no sense. But they're more likely to say why. Why are we doing this? I know lovely, and I call them philosophers like Nelson Mandela. My philosophers will say leadership is about asking people why they're here. The ruler will say, I lead by telling people what to do. So there's that subtle difference. So when you look at women and you have the same dynamic, women are very menstrual, we're circular, we embrace the round, but some of us have a masculine energy, and we're more in our head. So we go into our head first and we say, what's going on? I've got 100 ideas and I want to tell everybody about my ideas. What are we going to do? So whereas the ruler was saying when, she's saying what? Lots of ideas, concepts. And the other female, who is more feminine-minded female, is a sovereign, because she's asking who? Who is with me? Who am I? Who's going to be in my castle? And she's extremely, amazingly detailed focused and creative in a beautiful sense. Whereas a magician is creative in ideas, and she's got her magic wand out there like Merlin.
Mhm.
But they are both female, so they both have that nurturing core. Now, when you see these dynamics, the when, the why, the what, and the who, we need all of these people to make harmony. And that's what we don't understand yet, because of all the things I've said before, the traditional mind. Things should be like this. The Titanic will never sink. Profit is the only motivative. That's all on that hard-nosed, masculine ruler's way. Whereas we now have millions of women who run their own life, their own business, and a lot of women in politics now and in corporate corporate competitiveness. But sadly, a lot of women are still playing the man's game. And That's no critique of them because
and
we
trained.
have a world which has been designed by men. So
Mhm.
my view is we need to really understand, going back to what is natural. So what is our natural traits? What's our natural archetype? And what value do I bring to a table that could possibly look different now that we live in a post-COVID AI space devoted changing planet? We need all the characters around the table. And the biggest thing we need to do is to not forget the past, but allow ourselves to say, you know, what is the question we're not asking yet? You know,
Right.
we're trying to look for questions based on answers based on questions that are not the right questions. So if you say the world should do things right, as opposed to what is the right thing, you immediately shift. And I believe that, you know, when you look for harmony, like with an orchestra, you
Mhm.
look to blend the music together, but you
Mm.
still have times when the strings only play or the
Right.
drum comes, percussion. And that's, I think, the learning, the experience that the world is being challenged with now.
Oh, I love the analogy. And then it also depends on the conductor, right? The
Oh, yes.
conduct, what kind of pace or what kind of personality and energy is put into the group. And then they either thrive or,
Yes.
as you said, they feel controlled and they pull back or however the reaction is. But this is perfect. Yeah.
Well, that's right. And it's interesting because I'm sure some people, if they never saw an orchestra before, they might say, well, what's the conductor there for? He's
Yes.
not playing an instrument.
Yes.
But the conductor is, as you said, is our CEOs, our public figures, our politicians, you know, and if they're not tuned in to all the pieces of the orchestra, then the whole piece isn't working.
Right, right. Yeah. So what is the challenge now for the CEO, but also for the people who are not tuned in now? Like what's our next step in order to create this harmony and this change that makes actually the world a bigger, better, beautiful place?
Well, that's the billion dollar question, isn't it? Is why do we have a very unequal world? Why do we have a very damaged world? Why do we have wars? I mean, there is huge amount of greed and corruption. So that the fundamental is how do we discuss and share values and then put those values into action? Because, you know, many leaders say, well, I treat my people well, I pay them lots of money. And you go, yeah, but they're skulking down the corridor feeling really unhappy and they're not performing at their best. And I will go back to Sir Richard Branson because he's just celebrating 40 years of Virgin. He
Mm.
has 70,000 at least employees in different companies. He's still out there. He's in his 70s. He's my age. And I would say that possibly at least 95%, if not more, of people who work for him have a happy, healthy life. Isn't that a good position in the world? He's making lots of money, but he's enabling other people to lead a good life. So the spin-off with that is every employee who then goes home is better with their family. They bring their kids up better. They have a better vision and mission in the world. That's the key for me. Is developing a sort of a lively entrepreneurial capitalist, might say, but not going into the extreme of control. And that's the way it can only be to get other billionaires who are mean, you know, and then you have to judge, well, what is fair, you know, and everybody in the world cannot be exactly the same. That's not going to work. But how do we narrow the gap to create, in business terms, healthy high performance? And that means that that employee loves going to work. And in fact, years ago, when I was studying some of the stats, they always said that belonging and having a friend at work was one of the major factors of why people worked at a certain business.
In school, that's why people love or hate to go to school, right?
Yes. Yeah. And if you go into a toxic environment because
Right.
the boss or the teacher is mean, then you start rippling that out in your life. So it does come from the individual knowing themselves and dealing with all those things. But it's also about us as communities understanding our unique plus point in the collective. And that's where it's difficult because I think we've got so many systems that control us to be the way we are. How come you didn't get all your O levels? Why didn't you go to college? Well, you didn't, you know. So in our University of Entrepreneurialogy, we say to people it's about knowledge, experience, and imagination. And we actually don't care if you didn't get all your O levels. It's what did you do with your life? And did you make a difference?
Right.
Yes, financially, but also did you make a difference to other people? And then for me, that's the criteria for life. And to be honest, Hedi, I don't know how we get past the extreme polarization that we seem to have created in the world at the moment. But I do believe it, if you like, if what's most important is to examine your experience, can we as a world examine this experience? Now, that's a big, big ask because we have to go down into units, into the family, into the business, into the nation, and explore what is human life about.
What is human life about?
I believe it's about experiencing our human life to the best of the best possibility that this human life has, and therefore deal with painful situations. So, even if I'd had a toxic upbringing, or I'd had a bullying at school, or I'd been raped, there's so many things that could happen to anybody. And then maybe I had a car accident and lost a limb. I mean, when they blew up the London Underground back in 2007, there was one girl I remember reading about, she lost her legs. She eventually got prosthetic legs and she got married and she rose out of that tragedy.
Right.
There was no way she could have predicted that she would be on that train at that moment when that happened. And therefore, our ability to deal with incredibly difficult situations is our growth place.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. One last question. This was a blast. So much in there. What is our task as women now, especially in this transformation that we're in the polarization that we're in? What is our homework?
Yeah, absolutely profound question, Hedi. And I do personally believe, and this is my perspective, that we need to be the women we are. And let go of some of the aspects that we needed to deal with in the past. So, for instance, I say to people, let's say goodbye to equality, hello, harmony. I don't mean ignore equality, but look at it realistically. What do we need now? And I believe women have fantastic contribution to make to a world which will be much more mutually respectful, will understand the community. I mean, you can only see the evidence, women who run businesses always do more for the community. They have the support of the community. They want to set up foundations to save the world. It's a different way of being. That's not to say men have to be like that. Women have a role now to me is to be more competent than be competitive. I know a very wise lady in South Africa who's called the Woman King, and it is a bloodline, a royal bloodline that she inherited, and she is the first woman. So she's called the Woman King. And she said, for me, it's about being competent. I can do everything that a man could do, but I do it in a female way. Whereas in order to have the vote and the suffragette movement and everything we strove for, we had to be out of our usual frame of reference and be more aggressive. And some women died in the cause and got damaged. We've done all that. We've done all that for 100 years. Let's now say, right, let's take our best traits into the conversation. And I do that all the time. And I find so many wise men who say, thank goodness. But you will always get, if you like, I talk about a joint custody world with authentic harmony. That is not appealing to the extremists. And it's almost like the third option. And my first husband used to say to me, oh, you're middle of the road. I say, yes, I am. I want to take the best from everything and make it the most beautiful piece of music or the most beautiful meal, whatever it is, and dine together, sing together, dance together. And I do believe we are at a critical point in our world history where we're being invited to do that. While everybody is extreme, I see a lot of people now looking at that coming together. But it's not just airy-fairy, we do everything together. We have to really understand the variety that's at the table. And with some simple things I say to clients, right, you're in a magical conversation, there's no judgment, but you're hearing things that you don't like. Don't stop listening. Don't grab them by the throat. Just listen and think, that's an interesting perspective. And just listen, and you don't have to agree, but you have to allow these perspectives to be at the table so that we can find where there is joined up writing, there's connections and consensus, and then suddenly there's a great big idea. Where did AI come from? Where did DNA come from? Where did, all the new inventions that we have in the world, and we accept them as natural, they came from somewhere. They came from us. So to your question about women, I think we have a vital role to understand each other as women to women, and to know that we have some very different lifestyles. Some women do not want to be in business. Some women do not want to be in politics. Some women want to be at home and looking after children. All of that is the beautiful tapestry of being a woman, and it's okay.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you. It was absolutely wonderful. So packed with wisdom. Thank you so much. Makes my heart smile.
Well, thank you. I do so love this world, and I do believe that, we're at a precipice of change, which is phenomenal, it's scary, and it's also sacred.
So much potential.
So much potential. And if you look at the words sacred and scared, they're exactly the same lesson.
Same. That's a wrap on another Changeliscious episode where transformation never tasted so good. If your soul's feeling fed, don't forget to follow, leave a love note, aka review, and share the goodness with somebody really ready to flip the script. For more juicy insights and sweet inspiration, follow me, Hedi Schaefer, and let's keep stirring up change that sticks. Until next time, stay real, stay bold, and keep it changelicious.